The fact of the matter is the war, maybe thousands of miles away, but as we saw last spring with that pipeline hack, one attack on one key piece of our infrastructure can spell headaches for everyone. We're all connected. And that means we all may be impacted, even if war in Eastern Europe may not be at our doorstep.
We're all vulnerable. It doesn't matter how much security we put in place.
Horry Georgetown Tech professor Stan Greenewalt prepares his students for times like this and says private businesses should do the same.
Companies have to be aware of the increased opportunities of being attacked. They're not going to so much go after us, the individual, they're going to go after companies so they can get larger sums of money.
It's something Department of Homeland Security leaders are echoing, saying before the weekend that companies, big or small, should beef up cyber resilience.
We're going to get a lot of attacks here because now the hackers don't feel as threatened or don't feel as governed because everyone else is focusing more on let's say, the Ukraine.
Greenewalt says the issue is, in an effort to hit a bigger target, hacks may trickle down to us. This weekend, in fact, federal cybersecurity officials discovered malware was used to target Windows-operated devices in Ukraine.
I would minimize what type of public information I would have on the World Wide Web.
He suggests if any attack happens, people should prepare, because panic only makes it worse.
So what can we do in Myrtle Beach? Is just go ahead and have the healthy discussions about how we can protect our own assets and then have the discussion about what's going on in the whole world so that we minimize fear.
And we all remember the Colonial Pipeline hack, long lines, empty gas stations. The blame was put on Russia then, and Greenewalt thinks the entire ordeal was a learning experience for them to see just how vulnerable we all could be after an attack on a private business.
A professor at the University of South Carolina says that because the U.S. has heavy trading ties with both Europe and China, we'll need to start evaluating the short-term and long-term impacts from the war in Ukraine. An international supply chain reaction is on the front lines of the war in Ukraine as issues with European imports and exports will affect global trading. According to Andrew Spicer, an international business professor at the University of South Carolina, we'll likely see the impact here in the Palmetto State.
I think America's involvement with the world is going to be challenged. And I don't think most Americans realize how much of what they consume on a day-to-day stuff is produced globally.
Spicer says while he doesn't think the war will last long, it will ultimately fuel inflation on products like gas, oil, and wheat.
I think the U.S. grows lots of its own wheat, and so we're not completely dependent on sort of supplies from that part of the world. But if the war continues for a long time, like other places, we'll have to make up the supply and the prices will go up. You can see wheat futures already going up in price. So they would influence the price of bread.
While he says South Carolina's gas prices are lower compared to other states, the supply cutoff of oil from Russia to Europe would lead to a spike in prices in the Palmetto State. And Spicer says it's important to understand the possible long-term consequences.
If we're going to deal with it seriously, we're going to have to think about how interconnected we are. And the idea that we could just cut those ties, I don't think is really fitting the reality of the world it is today.
When asking Spicer if South Carolina and the rest of the U.S. could avoid or even lessen these trading deficits by instead using locally sourced products, he says it would actually hurt us more.
The idea that we could easily replace that with American-made products is a nice one, but would come with pain and higher prices, and part of the inflation is coming from some of those ideas. So I think this is going to be a watershed moment as we think about really how do we involve not just militarily, which I think it's going to raise, but also economically with the rest of the world.
Spicer says that we're not in a stockpiling phase right now, so South Carolinians don't need to rush to the pump or to the grocery stores, but we do need to prepare for increasing prices in the weeks to come.
A whole bunch of us got together and we decided that it wasn't fair, and we deserve to be heard, and we will be heard, and we won't be silenced. And we're going to do everything that we can to make sure we're heard, and we deserve a change.
Now developing tonight, about 100 students protested during Darlington High School's Black History program today. We first told you about this issue when we spoke to these students just last week. They say they weren't allowed to include a scene in their Black History play depicting what happened to George Floyd. ABC 15's Tanya Brown was the only reporter on the scene for that protest today. She joins us live now from Darlington High School with more on this story. Tanya.
Jennifer, the students told me last week they weren't going away silently, and today their voices could be loudly heard outside the school. The voices of more than 100 students rang out in protest of Darlington High School's Black History program. They all walked out peacefully. They chanted, held signs, and sang. Some of the signs said, "We won't be silenced," "Am I next?" and "We can't breathe." Darlington High School student body president Tiara King says they refuse to be silent.
It's still a peaceful protest. We just deserve to be heard.
Some of the students told me last week they couldn't perform a play in the Black History Assembly as it was scripted. They say it featured a lyrical dance of a student on the ground with another student's knee on his neck, showing what happened to George Floyd. The students say school administrators told them they couldn't do that part of the play because it was offensive to others.
Our voices matter. We deserve to be heard. How can when one person get offended, our whole play gets canceled?
The district told me last week a concern was raised, and officials said in an effort to gain clarity, they wanted to see the program, but they were denied. They wouldn't say who denied them. Police and school administrators watched as students protested but didn't stop them. The district sent me a statement Monday saying, quote, "The Darlington County School District recognizes that our students have a right to use their voices positively and responsibly to affect change. At the same time, we must balance their freedom of speech with our responsibility to protect their safety and to provide a learning environment free of disruptions for our other students." Their protest ended when the Black History program wrapped up. They protested for about 45 minutes. The district superintendent says that he plans to meet with student leaders this week to hear their concerns.